All right. So I've been hearing the words a lot. That undermines our democracy. I hear this a lot from politicians. It undermines our democracy. When people have those point of views, when people don't believe the narratives, it undermines our democracy. And when politicians say that, I ask, whose democracy is being undermined? Our democracy that belongs to the nations, where we think we have the right to vote for someone who's going to represent us fairly, or the democracy where you guys choose who's going to represent us and how it's going to happen. No matter what the flavor is, it's always going to turn out the same. We have to bend over while you guys reign upon us like you're our lords. That's how it is. So whose democracy do we undermine when you're saying that? When someone challenges the narrative and you respond with that, that undermines our democracy. Whose democracy are you talking about exactly? That is a very important question, because if questioning everything that our governments are doing today is undermining democracy, then yeah, the majority of the populace is definitely undermining democracy. Everybody is undermining democracy because everybody's asking the questions, what the heck is going on and what is this leading to? And it's become very clear to what it's leading to, and it is tyranny. It has become very clear that when we want to share an opinion, when we want to voice something out, when we disagree with something that usually nowadays is the narrative that is being pushed down our throats, we're bigots, we're something, we're undermining democracy, we're asking the wrong questions. Hateful, bigots, religious fanatics, white supremacists, people who don't agree with the norm are outsiders. Things that are being taught to our kids right now at school, that if you're a certain skin color, you're inherently racist. You have to accept everybody, that we're in an inclusive society. An inclusive society means that you can become what you want or what you've been taught to think you want to be. For example, a little boy being taught that he can be a little girl, being made uncomfortable with the body that he is in, to the point where that little boy says, hey, I want to become a little girl, or they, or whatever the pronoun is. Whatever the pronoun is that that kid has picked or has been convinced or manipulated to think, that is what the kid is to become. So we ask questions about that. Why is our kids being educated these things? Why are they being taught this at schools? The schools that are supposed to develop the kids' minds into constructive, good citizens that do good for their lives, instead is degrading them, humiliating the families that raise these kids, causing so much hardship, so much problems. And with what is being presented to the kids nowadays, our entire families, with what we watch on TV, the kind of shows we watch, the kind of music we listen to, the kind of stuff that is there to entertain us and to teach us other sorts of things, it's just manipulation. It's teaching us just to consume. And not just consume anymore what we may like and make the people who sell us these products make money. Now they're making us consume things that are just hurting us. Bad educations, bad foods, bad qualities of lives that we, quite frankly, do not want. We do not need. Clearly, we do not need it. Clearly, we do not want it. We're voicing our opinions on that stuff every single day. People are getting arrested. They're being hit with hate speech. They're being hit with all sorts of rules and bylaws and situations as repercussions for them voicing that out. Instead of the democracy that these politicians claim we all have, that is being undermined when we ask these questions, instead of protecting our opinions and our voice, it's being used against us. We are shamed with it. Hey, you're undermining democracy because you want to have your own opinion. So exactly, whose democracy is this? What is democracy to begin with? What is the idea of it? What is it really when you break it down? Who is really making the decisions? Who is really voting for what? Is it really a vote? Or is it just a decision that was made before and it now is being presented to the public, in a sense, almost getting their consent, but just being told that that's what's going to happen? And now they can vote against it or not, but usually the vote is not going to favor the people voting against it. When they want something, they're going to have it, even if everybody in the country disagrees. So, what is democracy? Because it's always been like that, in a sense. Very few times in our history have we had actual proper democracy where the people are listened to. It's always a manipulation. It's always a farce. Something is always a catch with it. So how are we undermining the democracy that we have been taught represents us fairly, when we are doing the proper thing by asking questions, not revolting, not burning buildings, not causing chaos and violence on the street, where revolutions, revolts happen, and that's what happens. We are democratically asking, what's going on, and also saying, we don't agree with this. What's next? Well, what's next is that you're going to swallow it regardless, because that's what democracy is. They cut off the king's head several hundred years ago, and they installed these parliaments and these congresses and these Senate style systems where it's not just the king making up all the rules, when before it wasn't even the king making up all the rules. It was the king wanting something, and sometimes kings imposing things and making up all the rules, but usually the king had to consult with the people around him, the nobles, the people who were in charge of things, in charge of finances, in charge of the military, in charge of land management, in charge of the taxations. The people who were actually out there collecting it and doing it had to be consulted, and they had to put their opinion and tell the king whether this was good or not, whether that was a good idea or not. And usually the ideas that the king adopted and used and fought for and put his nation for was usually suggested by the people around the king. This will make you more money. This will expand our empire. This will be beneficial. So they removed the king, and now those people have become, in a sense, kings and queens. Little kings and queens everywhere. And the people around them that work for them, when they make decisions, in a sense, are like the people who used to work for the king. Are like they when they used to work for the king. Now they are kings managing a bunch of little principalities that make up our countries. That's what democracy seems like what it is. We're still under kingdoms, but it's very manipulated. It's very bureaucratic. It's a science of words, a political science, where we barely understand it. Only the experts do. And the experts are the ones that make the decision based on those political sciences. And we just got to follow it because we're, in a sense, mindless sheep, people who don't understand. That's what democracy looks like to me. And when they say you're undermining our democracy, that's exactly what they're saying. We are undermining their democracy when one of their members say that. You are undermining our democracy. Yeah, exactly. When you're saying our democracy, you're saying your democracy. The democracy that belongs to your select group of people, that are able to access lands, whatever they want. Whatever they want. And we just got to put up with it. We got to do the bidding. We got to fight the wars. We are the ones that have to enter the employments of their choosing and lose the employments of their choosing. And then we think that we have an option because we choose amongst that employment that's there. And then if we don't choose the right employment, the consequences are dire. And sometimes there's just no employment. Hey, that's normal. That's how it is in populated areas. where it's mainly cities and suburban. But when you come to a place like Canada, and still to the United States, and a lot of places around the world, but in particular a place like Canada, where people literally can almost starve to death. They have to go to a food bank. They need help. They need help from the state or from the local governments or from charities and people who have pooled resources into feeding the people who need to go to these food banks. It's like every Canadian that wants to, that doesn't want to live in the city, could literally live outside of the cities and manage like 20 acres of land without leaving any footprint, without doing any damage whatsoever, where it's actually beneficial, where they can do a little bit of hunting, a little bit of animal husbandry, a lot of farming, and do it properly. To where these people still manage to have a day job, do things, where their families do something more constructive rather than starve to death, go to the jails, join the gangs, become drug overdoses, become statistics that just lead to law changes. Where the pool of taxes got to go here and here and here and here. It's just a big mess. And this big mess, this big chaos leads to one thing: our management, our control. Because our lives are so out of control, there's so much diverse negative things happening, as opposed to the diverse positive things, or diversity in between the two, where you can manage the two like normal human beings should. It is literally made so chaotic for us that we literally are controlled through that. We need the school. We need the job. People don't know better. They don't know about agriculture. They don't know about educating their own kids. They got to send their kids to these things. A lot of people don't know what to do. They've been indoctrinated. So they begin to say, hey, this is good for us. We need this. This is the only means of life. Look at other countries. Look at what we've dealt with. But then again, look at history. Oh, there's a third world country here and here. Was it always third world like that? Maybe certain things don't work in certain areas. Certain things that work in other areas don't work in other areas. And this human condition that we have of needing to pool everybody in cities and give us this fake democracy, always these kings, always these emperors, always these leaders, these prime ministers, these presidents, these like whatever it's going to be next, the unelected officials that represent the country. We don't know what it's going to be next. Or the excuse of communism, where it says it's giving back the power and land to the people. Yeah, sure. Like every single Russian that supported the revolution, got a nice free life after it, where they all got to work land. A lot of Russians saying there was always jobs in communism. Yeah, because slavery is always needed. When you're being worked to death for free and being given what the master wants to give you, shelter you with what the master wants to shelter you with, where you got nothing but what the master provides. Yeah, he's always going to have work for you, especially when there's so many people who disagree with it and you need so much people to enforce it. When you're trying to convince the world that you are an ultimate super industrial power, but in reality, it's just slavery. That your people are free, they're good, they're properly fed, they're always working. Yeah, sure, those things may be true. But the whole beginning of those revolutions that were supposed to liberate people became the worst thing these people entered. And then what? Like a few generations later, after a few generations just suffer so much, those people come out with some business suits. Now more people live in apartment buildings. More people are doing drugs. There's some Hollywood. There's pornographic films. There's phones. There's technology, microwaves, which is positive. But clearly it doesn't really work when you try to put everybody on that. And people start saying, "Hey, this is not working, man. Just because I want to live in like a home doesn't mean I want to live in a condo, man. Just because I need electricity and light over my roof doesn't mean like I have to work myself to death just to rent an apartment." And when I say condo, that's almost like the best people can get in places like British Columbia, places like Toronto, all over Canada, when there's so much resources in the States. Like, they could do so much better, but yet, what you see. But in Canada in particular, you got people living worse, in a sense, than they do in the UK, like in more poverty, with more struggle than they do in the UK. And the UK is like literally like a fraction of the Canadian landscape. And it has like I believe almost 80 million people. Like literally twice the population of Canada with a little bit more. And this is the democracy that Canadians have. There's a new bill that is saying that Canadians are going to be protected. Their voices are going to be protected. But in reality, when you look into that bill, Bill C-11, when you look into it, it's actually going to censor Canadians. Regular people can't share. The only thing that Canadians are going to be able to see is more state-sponsored garbage. It's like when I first immigrated to this country. And I remember we didn't have cable, and I just saw the CBC, and I think like Global Channel, and then some other irrelevant channels, just regurgitating nothing but state stuff, and some of it was cool, some of it showed Canadian history, and some of the shows were pretty cool, but the majority of it was just regurgitated, just garbage. And it's like, that's what it's going to be for YouTubers. Like, literally, like, because of this thing, people like me who were having a hard time before because of censorship and malicious mindsets that just want to push trends rather than pushing creativity, having a hard time before that anyways, just trying to film animals, insects, the world around me, talk about things that I liked, being like a normal YouTuber. Now, literally, when I upload a video, it's literally just censored by default because of that bill. And they say that it's to protect Canadians, to protect Canadian content creators. But in reality, it's doing what it's always done, pushing Canadians outside the country to get recognized. Like, where a normal Canadian can't share his voice, share his opinion. What do you think that's going to do? It's going to make it worse than before. Canadians are going to leave. And what is Canada going to keep doing? Giving the people what it wants to give the people. What the government wants to give the people. The actors and people who they've chosen to stay behind. The Rick Mercers, The people who they think are funny and we need to hear. The trends that they think we need to hear. More of this drag queen story time. More of this LGBT stuff. And I was at the point in my life where I was like, hey, listen, man, I got to be more tolerant, this and that. Like, maybe I got to curve my religion a little bit. But after being insulted like this, after not being to be able to give my kid a proper education because of what they're teaching our kids at school, because of the insults, people burning our churches and making fun of us, and YouTube sponsoring hatred towards our cultures, towards our lives, and yet censoring people who just want to share normally, don't even want to talk about politics. Yeah, I don't stand for that anymore. I don't have any more tolerance. And to this democracy, I have rebelled. I revolt outright. You know, I'll still be here, pay the tax, do the things, but in my mind, in my heart, it's completely revolted from it. I want something else. I want to see something else. I don't feel safe in this country, and I don't feel like my kids are safe in this country. I don't feel like my family is safe in this country. I don't feel like my communities are safe in this country. As an immigrant, but because I have light skin, I've been considered a racist for my opinions. Because my kids are white, because the mom is of white skin. She's of a European, like 100% bloodline here. And the kids look white. They got blue eyes. My kids are going to be discriminated. They're going to go to school and be discriminated. When I just literally joined with someone to create a family away from that stuff, away from racial discrimination, and to think that because of that union, my kids are going to be racially discriminated for life. When I came to this country, I was racially discriminated for speaking a different language. Whatever. You know, this is the country that I came to. A lot of things have changed. That mentality changed. And then you get these late liberal trends that are saying that racism is this big problem, that to the point where they're just creating new racisms. Now I'm being targeted all over again for being light-skinned. When before I was being targeted for being light-skinned by darker skin community, and then being targeted in lighter skin communities for having a little bit more darker skin than them. For speaking a different language, for having traditions and beliefs that are much more different from them. These are things that people normally do. This is just human nature. You see it in wildlife all the time. Things discriminate each other, yeah. But to think that the government is saying that they are fixing that by causing it more, and openly discriminating my children at school, and then teaching them all these horrible things, sodomizing them, teaching kids about sex ed at a very young age, showing them and saying that, hey, this is okay, these acts are okay, you know, it's okay to try things. And then now you can try things with your same-sex friend over there. There's no limits. That's disrespectful. And to think that they're nailing this all the time, they're reminding the kids of this every time. They got the flag in the kid's face. Drag queen story time. Are you kidding me? Or they got these things like once a week in certain areas. Come on. Teaching kids that if they think differently, they're outsiders. What is that? Isn't that not racism and hatred and sexism and it's like what does the KKK tell you? If you're not like them, you're an outsider. What are they telling our kids? If you don't believe in this new indoctrinated stuff, you're an outsider. What is this? This is not the kind of future that I need for my kids. And already from the hardships that I have had growing up and dealing with, and the battles, all the struggles, yes, the hardships, it's made me who I am. And at the same time, all the good and all the perseverance from those hardships. I have a lot of setbacks. Getting out of those things and succeeding and thriving, that has balanced it out. And to have a system like this that's so negative and is going to teach my kids to be negative about themselves, to be negative about the world around them, and to call it being positive. It's positive to not want to own land. One of the biggest issues I have, the reason why I rebel from this, and yes, absolutely, by asking these questions, I completely undermine your democracy that you consider our democracy, is I live for owning land. And I'm in a country where you don't actually own the land. Some queen or crown owns the land. Okay, whatever, but you can get tenures where you are like a freehold owner and you get like, full ownership of the land in a sense. But they can still tax your land and install bylaws and things and even confiscate your land in the name of the greater good, of the name of building something over it and give you chump change for it. And if you don't accept it, They'll take it from you and give you nothing. And if you hold on to it and hold on to a tree, you might get batoned to death or get shot, get put in prison if they're able to, really pry you off that tree. This is serious. Okay, but people like me, not just like me, I live, this is my beliefs and my traditions, my culture, to manage land in one way or another, even if I don't own it. I believe it's part of my existence, part of my whole entire drive and cultural drive to be able to grow your own food, to be able to own animals at a reasonable rate. And we came to a country where there's a lot of land, where every Canadian citizen can literally have like 100 acres of land. And it's like, to think that, like, because of laws and stuff like that, and the prices, my kids and a lot of people around me, the majority of my family, even if they have a home, will never be able to have independence like that. Like, I live to be able to go into nature. Like, the city depresses me. Especially with what's happening today, it depresses a lot of people. I don't want to live in the city. I live in the city by force, in a sense. And it's like, to think that they're starting with, you want to go camping, you got to pay for it. You got to register your name. You got to do this. You got to do that. This World Economic Forum saying you'll own nothing and be happy, all that stuff. We've heard that quote a million times, yeah, from different people that don't like it, voicing their opinions against it. But saying that going into a forest is going to be a privilege, not a staple. And we're already seeing that happen. All the stuff that we're saying, hey, we don't agree with, they're forcing it on us. Teaching our kids these things, taxing us like this, convincing us that natural events of global warming and climate change is just purely our faults, that we are the sole causers, that we need to lose our freedom. There's no other way of doing it. Oh, by the way, you're not allowed to own this land or buy this land or go in this direction or do this or do that. You can't do things differently. You can't do things better. The way that we are making you do things pollute the earth and destroy the earth, but we're blaming you for it. Oh, and by the way, like we just said, you're not allowed to do anything else. You're not allowed to have another alternative. So whose fault really is it? It's not our fault. We're the ones being forced to do this. We're the ones that are being forced to live like this. Live in squalor. Live in overpopulated centers where they say those centers are overpopulated and we need to put more restrictions on those people. That's deliberate. It's by design. And I'm of the mindset that I am to one day manage land, at least a couple of acres or at least something, in such a vast, gigantic country. I don't want to live in the city. I don't want to provide my kids that type of world. Because of what they're educating the kids, we want to educate them in an alternative way. We want to give them a different type of economy, a different type of life that is going to be sure and solid for the rest of time. And that is the management of land. And it's like, we don't even own land in a country like Canada. We got this false democracy that they claim is represents us. What I see is we're just living under a monarchy still. An even worse monarchy. Where for a while it was giving us rights because we were expanding into these countries, creating them, taking land away from other people, competing with the First Nations and moving them off their land. And then, after they're done with us, after we've built everything they've wanted us to build, remove the people they wanted us to remove. And when I say us, I'm just a Canadian, because my skin is light, right? I'm automatically involved in this, right? So I might as well just say we, because we is anybody. This is human history. First Nations people did it to their own people, to neighboring tribes, neighboring nations. It's the beginning of Europe. It's the beginning of the Middle East. It's our entire world. It's human nature. And as well as just nature in general. But apart from human nature, we are also human. You know, we're not living in the 15, 16, 1700s anymore. We can do better. So when you have people like that saying that they claim that they are catapulting us into a much better way of thinking and doing, and then they're repeating such primitive, tyrannical acts again with the way that they're doing things today. Like, how has this changed? How are we not still living in the past? Yeah, we've had a few generations of peace lately, but still fighting for wars, fighting world wars, fighting for our masters in England or France or wherever. It's like, when have people really had that freedom? Except for the ability to live in some peace in between wars, in between recessions and revolutions and governments confiscating lands. Is there families really out there who really have that healthy mindset and they can pass it on for a couple of 100 years at least? A healthy mindset with a healthy production for their family. It's definitely hard enough living this way. And to have a government like this add things even further is more than degrading. It is harmful. We need to look at things for what they are and do something about them.